Alrighty, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks so much, everybody that already has engaged with the chat. My name is Angelyn Nichols. I'm a specialist here in Virginia Beach in the Office of Professional Growth and Innovation, and I'm really excited to be here with you today. If we were face-to-face today, we could use this four-corner activity, and I would be moving to corner 4 and joining some of you folks with that word of cooperation. Working together, I think, is so critical right now, and we're just really thankful to have you here to connect and engage today and that we can learn together. We are going to use two options for communicating today during our webinar. The first will be that chat option, which most of you have already engaged with. In case you're just joining and you're new for us here with Zoom, you can open that chat feature. Typically, you can hover toward the bottom of your screen. We are going to ask you to set your chat to all panelists and attendees. This allows you to communicate with the whole group today. It's a terrific way to share ideas, resources, and strategies in our time here together. And then the second option that we have for today, and it's unique to this webinar feature in Zoom, is the Q&A. You'll open that Q&A option the same way you did for chat, but what's nice about that Q&A is it allows you to communicate directly with me as well as our panel of teachers. And we are going to have some time on the back end of our webinar today for a question and answer panel with our teachers. So as we work through today and you have any questions or wonderings, please go ahead and put those directly into that Q&A and we'll monitor those. There's also a terrific feature where you can upvote a question. So you'll notice there's a thumbs up once a question's been added. So if you want that question to be answered and that's one that's important to you, then we will make sure to follow that along. I just got a Q&A in there that says the audio is a little choppy. So I'll see if I can check anything out on my end, and hopefully we can get that cleaned up pretty quickly for you. So today during our webinar, we have three main goals. We really want to understand that effective classroom SEL includes those opportunities for students to practice the SEL skills during academic instruction. We want to learn from some Virginia Beach teachers about the ways that they are integrating SEL into academic instruction right now during emergency learning. And we're also going to explore your questions and your wonderings in that Q&A. And this is really so that together we can support the well-being, engagement, and learning of students across Virginia Beach. Virginia Beach, we align our social emotional learning with CASEL, which stands for the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And from CASEL, we're able to get those 5 core competencies of social and emotional learning. We have self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. In addition to naming those 5 core competencies, CASEL also then shares with us the skills of SEL within each of those. So I'm just going to pause for a moment, and I'd like to invite you to take a look at those skills. So CASEL, along with providing us those 5 core competencies and skills, also has a guide to school-wide SEL. And in focus area 3 of that guide, they really detail what SEL can look like at the classroom level. And they use a 3-legged stool as an analogy for effective SEL. And so at the classroom level, they'll look for SEL that builds that supportive classroom environment, opportunities for explicit SEL instruction, and then our focus for our webinar today is that integration of SEL into our academic instruction. And this guide to school-wide SEL really helps us to think about what integration looks like, sounds like, and feels like at the classroom level. And CASEL gives us 3 interdependent components to think about this. So we have the fostering of academic mindsets, and that's really when students can see themselves as a member of that community of learners. They recognize that their ability is really affected and their growth as learners is directly connected to their effort. Students have a belief that they can learn and that they can succeed, and they see and understand that the work that they're doing in their academic classes has value in their life. Now, we know that when we align SEL with academic objectives, that our unique academic disciplines have some processes and skills that align with them well. And so CASEL describes this as that ability to not just acquire knowledge, it's really about being able to do something with the learning. So I often think of this as a place where we can look to those action verbs within our standards of learning. And then that last there are those interactive practices. And so when we think about designing and delivering instruction, We want students to be making meaning of the content. And CASEL really pulls out two critical skills here. The first is those student discussions and communications. And the second then are opportunities for cooperative learning with each other as they're learning and collaborating. As I introduce you to our amazing teacher panel today, I just want you to keep in mind those components of interactive and supported SEL. Today we're going to be learning with Mr. Nobles. He is a teacher at Plaza Middle School. We have Christina Burney from Princess Anne High School. Crystal Barone is here with us from Thorogood Elementary. And Mr. Chris Jacobs is joining us from the iLab at Green Run High School. And these teachers are going to share some practical and authentic examples with you today. So we're going to kick it off with Mr. Nobles.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anthony Nobles. I am an 8th grade civics and economics teacher at Plaza Middle School. I am going to talk mostly today, I'm going to focus on a couple of slides ago, the idea of integrating SEL with academic objectives, particularly with emergency learning. We've been given the essential objectives in our classes. And it's a tough thing where we want to, in some ways, scale back how ambitious our assignments are and how much we are asking of students at home to ensure that we can give them the flexibility to meet those expectations. But we still want to make sure to incorporate social and emotional learning, and so it's tough to do less while still doing more. And so I'm going to try to focus on ways to integrate SEL with the objectives in your classes. And the first way the main way that I think I do that in my classroom is by using key concepts, big concepts. So if I dig into the standards of learning for civics, I'm seeing some SEL, but not a lot. But it's really when I look at civics on a conceptual level and economics on a conceptual level that I can so examples of that in other subject areas might be the concept of organization is important to math, and maybe through the concept of organization in the mathematics sense, you can connect to the idea of organization as an SEL skill. The concept of cause and effect in health and PE, the causes and effects of our behaviors. Well, there are also causes and effects of behaviors that we can teach in an SEL sense. In English or in a foreign language, there's the concept of communication, and that's also a concept that directly relates to SEL. So for me, I try to break my subject down into those concepts and use that to make connections to SEL. So I'm going to talk about 3 different connections to three different aspects of social emotional learning. So the first content connection that I'm going to talk about is that at the start of all this continuity of learning, I was in the middle when we left school of a unit on state and local government. And so when I think of state and local government, the concept that I relate to is community. And so that seemed like a natural way to connect to ideas like social engagement and appreciating diversity. And instead of talking about that in the local government community of Virginia Beach, I broke that down for my students with an assignment that related to prompts about our classroom. So what are the traits of a community? How is our classroom a community? And then they did a Flipgrid post where they they responded to those prompts, and they also gave a suggestion for some way that we could make our online learning situation more like a community. So that assignment allowed me to still connect to ideas of local government and what a local government does and how we function as a community, but also to make that relatable for students. And I thought it was nice. This was right at the point where we were maybe a week or 2 out of being in school. And so it was a nice way to remember what it was like to be there, because for some middle school students, they can think about being in school, and whether they admit it or not, which they never do, they miss it a little bit. The next assignment that I'm going to talk about relates to economics. And for me, whenever I teach economics, and this is true whether I'm in school or out of school, a lot of my assignments in my economics unit in the emergency learning plan are pretty similar to what I would have been doing if I had been in school. I connect to the idea of responsible decision making. And so economics assignments are about how do you make responsible economic decisions. So I gave my students there was an assignment with the prompt on the right here of some real world or realistic, maybe a little cheesy, but how could you spend your time? What would that cost you to spend your time that way? And how would you make decisions about how to spend your time? They also did an assignment with economic concepts on like an island plane crash, and came up with scenarios related to how different economic choices might play out. And I think in a lot of subject areas, if you can find ways to connect to the idea of responsible decision making, we want to encourage that in students wherever possible. And again, do middle school students always make responsible decisions? No. Do they often make responsible decisions? It depends on the student. But these assignments were about allowing students to see and think about responsible decisions. The third assignment here is actually, this is kind of a series of assignments. In my, and again, in civics, I think there's room for it, but I think there's room in other subjects as well to connect to what's happening right now. With 8th graders, I don't know that it's possible to ignore with any of our students the reality of the pandemic and all the changes that they're seeing in their daily lives. And so in a civics class, I try to embrace that. And from the social emotional standpoint, that allows me to encourage students to identify emotions and to empathize with others. Very early on after all of this, in one of my first synchronous meetings, we had a conversation about the range of emotional responses that students might be feeling. And I wanted to reassure them that any one of those emotional responses was a perfectly appropriate emotional response. I'm still talking about we're still learning about the concepts of economics. And so the pandemic has given me some opportunities to encourage them to see aspects of economics. So I gave them an activity where they could create a meme or create like a short TikTok style video that embodied the concept of supply or demand or choice. But a lot of them wound up submitting responses that were about shortages of toilet paper or at the grocery store. I do my best wherever possible with those types of connections they're never mandatory for students to share, but I have found that when students are given the opportunity to share, sometimes they need a way to share. And sometimes a conversation that is very content related, like what is the government doing about this pandemic, can become not content related at all. A student in front of a larger class meeting in front of 15 or so of his classmates confided in others that his aunt had died during the pandemic. And that was something where we took a content conversation and it got away from that very quickly. I think about, certainly the pandemic relates a lot to social studies, but I think in a science classroom, there are ways to talk about this. In a math classroom, especially at the secondary level, and even in like classrooms in the arts to talk about what's happening. I think there are a lot of ways in different subject areas right now to connect to current events. So for me, the big thing the idea that I'd like to leave you with is to stick with big ideas when it comes to social emotional learning. And I know that we've been given our specific content, essential content to cover. I would just say, where possible, take a step back from that, look at the big picture, and try to connect to some big concepts, because I think the more open-ended you can leave assignments, the more you're going to find that students' social and emotional needs come to the surface anyway.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nobles. Next, we're going to be hearing from Christina Barney.
Hi, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well today. I am Christina Burney. I teach AP Psychology at Princess Anne High School. And the two key things I wanted to touch on today as we look at the integration of SEL with academics that I think anyone can really utilize, regardless of your content, are surveys and reflection prompts. There you go. So when school first shut down, I had a lot of ideas. I teach an AP class, and I knew kids were going to have differing needs. And so I asked them, I did a survey and asked them what kinds of activities they wanted to see as we transition to a virtual learning platform. And as you can see, the results were kind of all over the place. With surveys, what's helpful is that they help to promote a student voice. It also allows me to facilitate relationship building. When I use them throughout the year, as we reflect, like at the end of the first 9 weeks, you know, the kids may not like certain things we do, but I'm able to then explain why we do them, which I think helps to build that connection. And I'm also able to take some of their suggestions and make tweaks if it makes sense and if it has a legit value. So here I got the input, and based off this input, what I ended up doing was creating this log. And it's a very basic log that's down here in the corner where they could track. And so in Schoology, what they saw was this folder that had all sorts of different options presented to them. And I started filling them as we went to try to get everybody's needs addressed. The discussion boards are helpful for promoting communication. I did provide collaborative and individual options. And then I also included a self-care activity. I knew some of my kids were already struggling with mental health issues beforehand. And so I wanted them to have some resources present to kind of meet those needs. And so they could do, you know, I had a couple of kids who just only did self-care activities, and I was okay with that. After we, one of the things I included was a content review using practice questions. And so this was the reflection that I posted for them to use. And this helps to promote self-awareness in terms of identifying their areas of strength and weakness, but also what are their plans, so that responsible decision-making moving forward to you know, address those issues, and also how I can help, specific ways of things that I can kind of help to meet their needs. As we transitioned over to emergency learning, I used a Google form for this survey and kind of stepped it up a bit, because what you can do, if you're not aware, is based off the question they answered, it took them to like a follow-up section of additional questions that tied directly to which level they were at, whether they were actually taking the AP exam or not. And then everyone at the end answered these scale questions of how would they rate their mental health and how would they rate their productivity. With those mental health questions and the productivity questions, I was able to reach out to kids who indicated low scores, just as a check-in and follow-up. And that was really helpful, I think, for that relationship building piece as well. As the logs I've created now with emergency learning, I try to step it up a little bit to improve the visual appeal of it. So including some Bitmojis, some color, and basically I did two major strands, one for the kids taking the exam, which you can see here. And so with this kind of reflection piece, I try to focus on like the responsible decision making, where you can see like, you know, where are your plans for taking the test? What's it actually looking like? My kids aren't going to test until next week, so I wanted them really thinking of ahead of time of what they were going to be doing. What questions are you left with versus do you have any questions? We know as teachers, you know, that subtle language shift can make a difference in what they respond. And this helps them to get organized, and again, improving that communication with them. To address some of the motivation piece, my kids not taking the exam was a little bit harder because a lot of those AP level kids who aren't taking the test are kind of motivated more by grades. And so I kind of addressed that in my explanation of this part of the assignment of just, try to build your intrinsic motivation, focus on things that matter to you. And I gave them some ideas of things that might be the focus of this assignment, which is basically for them to find a research question that they want to pursue. But then again, reflecting at the end of, why did you select this topic? What questions are you left with? As we moved into the second week of emergency learning, I provided more options that week. And so what I've just included here is the final reflection piece of where there are specific things they wanted to see for this week. And as I graded those assignments, I actually kept a record of it. And so my week 3 emergency learning assignment actually has 5 different options for students based on the information they gave me that they wanted to see. But I also wanted to encourage them to prepare academically and non-academically. And so this reflection helps again with that, responsible decision making. And then I did provide an opportunity for them to request a personal meeting. I've only had 5 students actually say they need one, but I feel good knowing that, I provided that opportunity for them to, again, get those needs met and build that relationship. With Zoom meetings, I've been doing Zoom meetings since we closed, and because I teach all AP Psych, I've been doing them not by block, but as a group. And so the Tuesday sessions are a more academic focus, so it's like a Kahoot game or the perspective review. And I have about 15 to 30 kids who will come to that. And then on the Thursdays, we do more mindfulness activities with a game and then address any academic questions they might have. And that's been a smaller group, but what's been nice is that even with that smaller group, I'm able to connect with some of the kids who I hadn't really had an opportunity in the classroom. There's one senior who jumps to my mind that, hadn't really talked much in the classroom, but has been coming like every Thursday. And so it's been really nice to build that relationship. And then the final thing I just wanted to share with you guys. So when I gave that survey, I asked students what were the things that they missed the most. And one of the things that they said, I kind of made a Wordle to kind of show. And what I just want to highlight with this is that, I think a lot of teachers, at least the ones I've talked with, have struggled with, at the high school level or maybe even the middle school level, kids not engaging and kind of taking that personally. And I was really surprised to see how many of them said, how much they miss the classroom and certain aspects of the classroom, like myself. So even if they're not fully engaging, they still miss you. So be kind to yourself, be kind to them. We're all missing the classroom. And the older kids, if you notice up at the top, they really enjoy those mindfulness activities. Even though I haven't had a ton of kids coming for the Thursday mindfulness session, a lot of them did mention it in their survey results. So next week when we're doing the explicit SEL instruction, definitely want to check that out to get more tips on ways to incorporate mindfulness in the classroom because the kids really do enjoy it. All right, thanks.
Thank you so much, Christina. We're now going to be hearing from Crystal Barone.
Hi there, I am Crystal Barone, thank you. I am the second grade inclusion teacher at Thoroughgood Elementary. And so something that can be so easily embedded into those live meetings is a celebration of the academic accomplishments that they are making. A couple shout outs, and they can be so simple as just an extra activity that they did. And I gave some examples here that my second graders are doing, but Smarty Ants, Epic, Dreambox, and it's, it helps to motivate them and encourage them to complete that academic work. And we want to make them proud of what they are doing. And it gives the students the chance to celebrate one another. So there's that relationship piece that we worked so hard at in the beginning of the year to build and maintain, and to continue that through this virtual learning. Relationships are built off of self-awareness. So with that, self-management and self-awareness in the SEL competencies, how you give your students their academic feedback helps to build their self-motivation and self-confidence. And I typically give my feedback through Seesaw, Flipgrid, and Schoology. And I make sure that feedback comes as a typed response and as well as my recorded voice, because it's important that they hear me and hear my voice. And because of course, we all know that typed feedback might not sound the same as if it is in our head when they read it. Here is, and these are just examples of, how to start out with that responsive classroom feedback, where you're noticing and you are pointing out the positives. You paid attention to, you remembered to, you all helped to, and then whatever it is that they were working on. This next slide is just an example of feedback. So Adam, you paid attention to this week's economics video, and I make it more motivating with that personal message that I add in there. And this is in Seesaw. And again, it's that responsive classroom reinforcing language. They're recognizing their own strengths, and it's helping to build their confidence through the academics that they're doing. I add in, some stickers so that they feel, there's that motivation piece, the self-awareness. It kind of all ties in, and they're more apt to just say, okay, Miss Barone is noticing, she's noticing, and I'm going to try even more. I'm going to do even more next time around, which also leads into responsible decision-making. And there's a few different things. We all have that Flipgrid fever right now, and which I very much enjoy, but responding to questions that may pose a problem. So I'm using Flipgrid now for like our Wonder Wednesdays, or I do it on the other days that I don't have meetings. So let me rewind a second. I have meetings on Tuesdays as like our morning meeting, and then we do a reflection on Fridays, and where we wrap things up. So then Wednesdays and Thursdays, we do more Flipgrid stuff. So for this example down here, like building a fort indoors, what are the materials that you need? How would you go about using this? Are you making a plan, or are you just jumping right into it? And after we discuss that and they share with us, what worked, what didn't work, and then tying that into, well, when you did your fraction assignment that we had the other day, did you kind of make a plan? Did you write it out, or did you just jump right into it? So that responsible decision making and tying that into academics. So the other morning meeting we had was to share their ideas of how to identify and solve everyday problems. So they were asked, what kind of problems would you have in your home during a week? So this was a Tuesday, the beginning of our week. So really think about your problems throughout the week and think about how you would solve them. And we brainstormed some ideas of problems, and we kind of talked about it. We didn't get so much into the solutions yet because I wanted them to take the week to really figure that out on their own. And so this example here was mine that I shared with them. And and I made it really simple. I said, I have 2 cats, and my problem is that they're scratching up my couch, and I don't know what to do about it. So, and even right away, they're 8-year-olds, they want to give you all the answers, and they're right there with you. And then I came back on Friday, and I added color to it. I added words to it to like bring it up. And I said, this is what I tried, this is what I did, whether it's working or not. And they were really excited to share the decisions that they were, the ideas and the problems and the solutions that they were making with each other. And then that they were collaborating with each other and communicating, like, oh, can I make a comment on, so-and-so's, and can I, make a comment on, because they want to help each other, and there's that relationship piece too. So that's why this all ties in together, and it's so beautiful when you bring it in. And I really feel like this virtual learning has even grown my relationships with my students even more, because I'm seeing them in a different angle, a different view, and it's so powerful. Some a couple other ideas that I had. Well, build a fort. What problem did you solve this week? And another one was, what's something in your home that needs to be fixed or improved or cleaned? And what steps would you take to do that? And that's all that I have.
Thank you so much, Crystal. And we're now going to hear from Mr. Chris Jacobs, and he's going to share with us what's working for them over at Green Run High School.
Hey everybody, can you hear me okay? So my name is Chris Jacobs. I'm the lead teacher at the Innovation Lab at Green Run High School. And I wanted to share a little bit with you guys, hopefully I can get this screen going here, about what our goal is in this online learning, and it corresponds with what we do on a daily basis as well. So the iLab at Green Run is based upon learning expeditions, social and emotional learning, and interdisciplinary learning. And so just like that, when the virus hit, two of our main pillars are thrown out the window. We cannot go on learning expeditions, and we can't really do a lot of interdisciplinary work at this point. So what we're focusing on is relationships and focusing on the social and emotional learning aspects of our curriculum. So what we do, I want you guys to just get one thing from our time together today. And so it's this idea that I want you to try to find the emotional content in your work, no matter where it is, no matter what course that you're teaching, find that emotional content. Our students are feeling a lot of isolation. Our teachers are feeling a lot of isolation. We're kind of moving from being, our traditional roles as content experts and keepers to now becoming counselors and becoming, research fellows, sort of helping our kids research. I'm kind of seeing myself as a curiosity coach during this time period. And so one of the things that we've been doing is what we call lessons from the lives of others. And what we try to do is to take the important figures in our curriculum and study the details of their childhood, their family situations, their education, their adulthood, their failures, and their accomplishments, with the sole goal of trying to show the kids that there's trauma and that there are major events and there are obstacles that hit every one of our lives. And so in our curriculum, we focus on all kinds of people that the kids are interested in, from Mary Shelley to Malcolm X to Mae Jemison to Charles Dickens to Jay-Z, George Washington. And I decided today to just kind of model this for you guys for a couple of minutes to show you how we do it, to find the emotional content in a guy that everybody feels like they know pretty well, Abraham Lincoln, but to kind of show you how can we find that emotional content even in his life. And so with Lincoln, let me go back here real quick. With Lincoln, we try to focus on perseverance. Sorry, you guys, I'm jumping all over the place here. And we try to be explicit, and we say, hey, listen, all right, let's take a look at Lincoln's life here. What can we learn from him? We can learn about perseverance, we can learn about preparation, and we can learn about strong work ethic. And so with Lincoln, this guy in his childhood, he grows up dirt poor. He has his mother pass away before he's even 10 years old. And his dad abandons him when his mom passes away to stay with his sister, who's only not even a teenager yet. And the dad walks out and is gone for 7 months. Okay. And so immediately our students are like, oh, hold on a second here. There's something that I can connect with very easily. We talk about when Lincoln returns, he comes back after leaving his 2 children alone for 7 months. He comes back remarried with a new wife. And so Lincoln now has a stepmother who, thank goodness, was somebody good in his life. But she found the kids living like animals. They were dirty, they were skinny, they were scared, they were scarred. And Lincoln had spent some of this time, even though he was dirt poor, trying to spend some time reading. And his dad was not a fan of reading at all. And in fact, his dad thought school was what he called time doubly wasted, which means you're not just wasting your time, reading, but you're wasting time because you should be on the farm and you should be out working. And so these things in Lincoln's life, immediately kids can start to connect with in terms of the era that you and I are living in. There are many things that they can agree with, and they can see maybe even in their own lives. In the teenage years, Lincoln started trying to dream big for himself, even though he was sort of stuck in this environment. He once said that he did not intend to shuck corn or split rails, and he says, I'll study and get ready. and then my chance will come. And so he's doing all this preparation without being able to see an end in sight. And that's where a lot of our kids are as well right now. It's like, why should I be doing this work if I can't see where this is going? And so my hope, again, is that you guys are seeing how we try to make, this connection to the kids' lives and to what, not just this traditional content, but to make it come alive today. So we talk about how Lincoln becomes this leader eventually in his life when he goes into adulthood, and he's still having such a hard time getting access to books, and that Lincoln would walk 20 miles to the house of a man to secure a book. Okay, and so you think about Lincoln walking 20 miles to just get a book, and he says, look, and I read real slow. I learn slow, but because I read slow and I learn slow, I'm also slow to forget. And so the kids can kind of identify with that concept too. And then this is tough. And again, I'm not talking to the elementary school teachers here probably today with this, but at the high school level, again, you hear about Lincoln, 16th president, Emancipation Proclamation, Civil War, but do you know about Lincoln having, at the age of 32, fallen into this deep depression? And his friends were so worried about him at this point in his life that they had removed guns from his house, even scissors from his house. He had had trauma, from his sister dying in childbirth to the first love of his life dying. He breaks off of his engagement to marry Todd, who would eventually become his wife, because he didn't love her. He failed to, achieve all these things as a state senator, and then his state is hit with the worst economic panic that they had seen up to this point, and all their land values had plummeted. And so again, the correlation and the connections between what Lincoln is going through in our times are pretty easily seen for adults, but sometimes you got to kind of spell it out for the kids. Lincoln said that it took him 10 years to get out of that funk, to get out of that depression. So again, when the kids are hearing timelines of 18 months or 2 years, or when is it going to be that we come out of this stuff? And now we say, oh my God, Lincoln took 10 years to come out of his depression. And then when he eventually does, he goes to the White House. He wins the White House in one of the biggest upsets in American history. And when he gets in the White House, it doesn't, the easy street didn't start. He's got his sons living with him. One is off fighting the war, who was at Harvard, and said, man, I'm going to sit here at Harvard living the life, or I'm going to go die like the rest of these guys who are in the war. And so he ends up going to fight in the war. And then the two sons that Lincoln had living with him in the White House both contracted typhoid fever in the White House. And one of his sons passes away while he's in the White House. And so again, this is heavy stuff. And some people would be like, hey, this is a little too heavy to be even covering with the kids. But this is the stuff that they gravitate towards. We talk about Lincoln's wise words. And we continue with just kind of focusing on the emotional content. And so if there's one thing that I would have you get from my time with you today, would be to try to focus on the emotional content of whatever curriculum that you're investigating, and to bring that out and to make it applicable to the times that we are in today. So I know we're a little bit rushed for time here, so I think I'm going to stop there and show you this textbook here, or just book that you could look up if you wanted to learn some more about Lincoln's life. It does require us to do some extra research, of course, but it's definitely worth that time. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Chris. Alrighty, so we're going to just pause for a moment, and we want to invite you to use one of our engaging strategies from the SEL stockpile, and take a moment to just reflect on a little bit of what you've heard shared in these examples. This is synectics. The way it works is you'll choose one image, and then you can complete that sentence frame below, that integrating social and emotional learning is like a blank because blank. Feel free to record those into our chat, and then in just a moment, we'll move into our Q&A. So I'll remind you, you can access that Q&A from that icon there. And what questions might you have for our panelists today? Feel free to use that upvote option as well. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start with Q&A. So Crystal, if you can share a little bit for us about Dreambox. There's a question, just sort of what is Dreambox? And also, is it for only students in the lower elementary, or might that be appropriate for older students as well?
DreamBox is another application, just a practice application for math skills. And I'm not quite sure if it's available to older students. From what I've seen, even my daughter in kindergarten can use it, but I've never seen it in the older grades, maybe up to 5th or 6th grade. Sorry, I don't have an answer.
No, that's okay. So do you have a question and it can be open to the panel? Is there anything you're finding that's helping students stay engaged? They're kind of, when they're wanting to come back to class and to check in with you and their classmates?
I can share, I did reach out today to some parents of kids who haven't submitted the last 2 weeks worth of emergency learning assignments. And it was just, give them a heads up, but I also did ask them if they thought that their child might benefit from a text or a phone call from me, if they would just give me their kid's phone number that I could, reach out to them directly. And I did have 3 parents give me numbers and said, thanks, I really appreciate you reaching out. And so I know a lot of times teachers are like weary about, making those phone calls, but this was an easy way to kind of reach the kid directly. I haven't tried it yet to let you know if it works or not, but I'm optimistic that, like I said, even if I get a couple, it's better than nothing.
Anyone else finding any tips or strategies for that engagement piece?
I mean, I would just say one thing that's been good for me is wherever possible to try to, even in corny ways, make working from home feel like being in school. So we start every day in class with current events, and there's even just the way the slideshow is set up, there's a certain design for it. We do like special recognition on your birthday, and those are things that have been trickier to do from home, but that I've tried to be consistent with since we've been out. And I think that familiarity has been good for keeping students connected and keeping students engaged. I guess that's common sense. Wherever you can, try to mimic what being in school is like.
I'm just checking Q&A one more time. I was going to say, I see a question about DreamBox. I will do a little bit of research on my end. And when we send out some notes for the webinar, I can make sure to answer that question.
Angelyn, it's currently free right now. They're doing a free trial. And I did just look it up. It's K-8.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Crystal. Mr. Nobles, question here for you. How much is IB, so that International Baccalaureate, playing a role in those concepts that you're using in your class?
The answer is 100%. Because we're at an IB school, every unit we make a connection to one of those key concepts, and so those are, whatever that concept is, that's sort of where my jumping off point has come from. And that's not to say that IB has any sort of monopoly on those concepts. The nice thing about key concepts is that they are so general, they can apply in any content and at any level. And so for me instructionally, that's sort of where a lot of that comes from. But I think in every subject, there are big ideas. And if you take the time to unpack those, what the big ideas are in your subject area. And so I think it's just a matter of figuring out what those are and connecting to them.
Thank you. Crystal, one more question here for you. You mentioned using Flipgrid for Wonder Wednesdays. Can you tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. We decided as a grade level to do on Wednesdays our Wonder Wednesday, where we're posing a question and they have to think of a creative solution to a question, or it could even be something funny. I woke up this morning and I was 10 feet tall. What am I going to do? And where you're really getting those gears going, and just to keep it fun and engaging. And they really look forward to it because it's not just our classroom, but it's like they're in their PE class where they're with all the other second graders. and they get to comment on each other. So just every Wednesday is just another I wonder question, meaning, you know, posing those questions, or those open-ended questions that can get their gears going.
We want to come together here when use an intentional closure. And we just want to invite you one last time to interact with the chat feature and share with us your first next step. So this might be having a conversation, learning a little bit more about an idea, maybe trying something in your classroom. And we just love to hear from you, kind of what comes next. Seeing lots of comments about surveys, so we certainly will be willing to share back out with you slides and some of the examples from today. So we'd be expecting an email from me in the next few days with those resources to kind of get you kicked off and started.
Angelyn, can I also make the suggestion that you share Kimberly Collins's slides from her presentation, only because I think it really helps to highlight, like at the lower levels, ways to use those surveys to kind of tap into the emotional response of some of the younger kids.
Absolutely.
I think she used emojis, but I saw one online too where it was like animal memes where they're showing like emotional responses.
Definitely. So last week, Kim Collins teaches over at VB Middle, and she was one of our panelists, and she shared some of the ways she's using Google Forms to check in with students. So I can include the link to those examples in that email as well for everybody. So I just want to kind of wrap up today and share with you a couple of resources that might be helpful as you kind of head out for those first next steps. Today we pulled some strategies from our VBCPS SEL strategy stockpile. So we opened today with a modified 4 corners. We then used synectics for that kind of forced fit analogy, making sense of what we'd heard, and then did some reflecting there and thinking about decision making with my next steps. You're welcome to grab that bit.ly if you want up in the corner, but I'll also hyperlink that for you in the resources. The SEL strategy stockpile is a great place to begin when you're starting to think about that integration of SEL. It's organized so that those 5 core competencies are tagged, also aligned then with strategies. And I just want to point out that as you kind of get into that, if you've maybe seen it during the school year, there have been some modifications. And so any of those strategies that can be used virtually, even if they need to have a little bit of a shift, have some new directions and resources there for you for support. So feel free to explore that resource and see if there's anything there that might be helpful for your academic instruction. We do want to make you aware there is currently a course that is being offered in school through Schoology, but you can sign up for this in Frontline. It's a self-paced course. It shares with you some of the interactive learning structures that come out of Responsive Classroom. It is responsive to K-12, even pre-K. Teachers can take a peek if you'd like. So we invite you, if you'd like to learn a few more of those interactive strategies, to check out that course in the coming weeks in Schoology. And then just a reminder that we will be back here next week, fingers crossed, with no technology issues or goofs, and happy to have you join us for that last webinar on explicit SEL instruction. We'll be focusing very intentionally on the language skills, that mindfulness component. Christina touched on that a little bit today with another panel of really just fantastic teachers here in Virginia Beach. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to leave the webinar open for a moment. If you have any other questions, please feel free to leave those in the Q&A or the chat. I'll make sure to go back later and capture all of that. And we just thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much to our panelists. We appreciate you more than you know.